Hey friends, coming at you today with another episode of Finding Refuge. Backstory. Many of you know that I hosted a podcast, Finding Refuge, in advance of the book, Finding Refuge, coming out. And I hosted 3 seasons of that podcast with amazing people from all over, different backgrounds, different professional work in community, organizers, therapists, folks who held healing space, somatic practitioners. And I stopped that podcast because life moved in a different direction, but I still cherish all of those episodes. So in March, I released an episode of Finding Refuge with my friends and comrades, Stephanie Ghostin Paul, Amy Bertain, Rebby Kern, and Tema Oken. We are focusing on elemental energy, air, fire, water, earth, above and below, and how these energies can support us at this time. So in March, as the wheel began again and turned toward spring, we talked about the element of air and the cardinal direction of the east. I'm coming to you today with another episode of Finding Refuge focused on fire, the turn towards season, and the cardinal direction of the south. This interview includes myself, Stephanie, Rebby, and Amy, Tema in spirit because she wasn't feeling well when we recorded. And it is a juicy conversation and explores the energy of fire and its transformative power, and also how we can embody being a fire keeper. Each one of us, we all talk about fire and childhood memories as well. And I hope you enjoy this episode. And if you do, please share it with others so that they can be inspired by fire and summer, the season we've been in for about a month now. So I hope you enjoy it. We will be back when the season turns again to fall and the wheel turns toward the west and water. But for now, make a cup of tea, get your iced tea, make some coffee, or get some cooling water and tune in to this episode. Many blessings and blessed be. Yeah. Well, it's good to see y'all. Um, as Rebby just mentioned, we are a few days past the summer solstice where we live. Um, and according to the wheel of the year, the wheel turns toward the south for summer, which is the place of the midday sun. And the element associated with summer, of course, is fire. Um, and um, that seems like it's for obvious reasons, given that the heat that is in North Carolina right now, although I have a little bit of a respite from it because I'm in Western North Carolina and it's quite beautiful. Um, and so as we think about summer solstice, the longest light, and this turn of the wheel toward the south and fire, we might think about all of the different ways fire moves, how fires start, that many people say the world is on fire. I have said that myself many, many times. And the way fire, the one thing I think about is the way fire can burn down or burn away, but also uplift energy, that um, this energy of igniting something, starting something. Um, so that's a little bit about the turn. And the summer solstice, often it marks, it depends on where you are geographically, but in North Carolina at least, and in some other places, it's this time where we begin to harvest what we've planted in the spring, like physically, if we're gardening, or energetically, or even back to winter, what germinated in the darkness can come to fruition more fully during the summer season. And there's another harvest that will happen in the fall. So while summer is only 3 months long, it feels longer to me energetically because of the way harvest happens or can happen during the summer. And the other thing, final thing I'll share for now is that I think about summer and being a child, and like even though solstice is the longest light, it felt like all summer long. There was this longer experience with light and like playing in my yard or playing in the street with kids in the neighborhood or or sitting on the porch, right? The front porch or front stoop late into the night. I don't know, it felt like it took forever for it to get dark. And that is not true because I grew up in Virginia. Like I wasn't in Alaska where it is light all night long in the summer. I was in Virginia. But my association is like we're outside and we're hanging out, we're gathering and we're having, sweet tea on the porch and we're planting our flowers or it's just, I love summer for that reason. There's just a way community comes alive because of there seemingly being more light. So that is my reflection on summer.
Thank you, Michelle.
I'll offer, I just got to experience, I was telling Michelle this earlier, a really beautiful citywide community festival here in the north of Portugal, in Porto. It's the Festival of São João, St. John the Baptist. And I know very little. I don't want to pretend to understand what I do not being from this culture. And I'm learning that up in this region, there is a mixture of both Christian and Celtic influences. And so there are pieces to this festival, I was even reading online, that are sort of come from like pagan courtship rituals where people used to like bonk each other on the head with garlic flowers. So there's, just this sort of that, like you were saying, this time of fertility and sharing and community and reaching out. And so the party here, as I experienced it, was all the whole city stops and people grill sardines and there's block parties and it's very intergenerational, older people and children. And somehow at some point, these flowers, somehow somebody introduced these little plastic hammers. I mean, I worry about the environmental impact of 8 billion plastic hammers that I hope people reuse and don't just go into landfills. But you walk around the city and everybody just bonks each other on the head. And it's sort of this like fraternity, like, hello, neighbor, hello, friend. It's sort of a gesture of friendship. And it was really lovely because, you'd pass all kinds of people and, you'd bow your head for them or like for little kids or people would, kind of devilishly bonk you on the head. And I was saying to Michelle, I actually looked hundreds of people in the eye the other night, like in a way that I never would have walking around a busy city. Like we looked at each other and we sort of laughed and we had a connection and we enjoyed, and we'd bonk each other back. And so it was this really beautiful way of connecting. And I think of that as summer, sort of that outward connection and outward movement. And whereas in the winter we're inside, I don't know if I have the energy and I don't want to go out and talk to people. And here it was like all, thousands of people dancing and eating and bonking each other in the head and, wishing each other a happy festival. It was really a really special experience. And then one of their traditions at night is those the lanterns that you light at the bottom, those paper lanterns that go up into the sky, which again, I have a little bit of environmental concern because there's like these little tiny wires that don't burn up. And I don't know if a lot of these land in the ocean, but I will say it is a beautiful sight. And speaking of fire, to see, I mean, literally thousands of lanterns rising up throughout the sky all night long, like constellations, like fireflies. It was really, really beautiful. And I don't know if people send them up with wishes or if it's just a part of that, you know, ritualized praising of light and the coming of the light and or a beacon for protection. But it was really, really beautiful to see.
That sounds beautiful, Amy. I can jump in here too. Um, I really love the way that fire shows up in rituals and practices. We talk often in this group about um, light, when I think about light and darkness, and both in the perspective of the elements that we work with, and also as I reflect on my shadow work and elements of the darkness and while I might experience the darkness as a place that is void of light, it does not mean that um, there is not also good things to be there, like really throwing away that binary of like good and bad with light and darkness. Um, and growing up in Judaism, it one of my favorite uh, stories and practices is going back to think about the how the story of David and the temple and the relationship to fire and light. So David is doing work in the temple, and there was enough oil to burn for one night, or a limited number of nights. How are we ever going to be able to get this work done without this fire, this light, to provide the ability to see in the darkness? And you know, um, miraculously, the lamp with the amount of oil lasted for 8 nights. And it reminds me also so much of the unpredictability of fire, which makes it so fun to watch. It has its own dance, its own movement, its own sound, its own layers of color, um, its own temperature, and um, and in thinking about how fire is so necessary, is so important. Um, I appreciated, Michelle, how you um, drew the connection to the burning away. What I heard from that is purification. What I hear from that is, fire also creates. Whether we talk about through destruction, like the last time we were together, what can be born when we allow something to die. And fire plays so much of a role in that. Um, there's a phase of my life where I was very, in Ayurvedic terms, very much in my pitta, my fire space. I was so afraid of the darkness. I was so afraid of shadow work. I was so afraid, and I kept all of that locked up and away. Um, and I was doing, leaning into the length of the days, particularly in summer. But then I leaned into that heat and kept that going. Um, and I would say in the last 2 years, I have such a new appreciation for the darkness and the cold, and leaning into, ether and earth, and listening into that stillness. Just still something I am challenged with, of what do I hear and what do I experience when I get still. But keeping myself, my mind, and my body in constant fire and constant going and constant doing and constant tapas isn't healthy for me. And Ayurvedic practices have been helpful. I love hot coffee in the morning, and I will drink hot coffee when it is 95 degrees at 8 a.m. in the morning. And I'm like, maybe a little bit of iced coffee might feel balanced today before I go outside and go sit in this heat. And that's, such a small example. And I am seeking that balance now in a new way, because the fire is unpredictable. And while the light of the menorah might have burned beyond what we thought it would, sort of at this amount of oil through very scientific perspective and physics, um, I, however, might burn out when I'm too stuck in not going and doing. And today, on June 25 at 12:30 p.m. Eastern, there was an expectation of a big SCOTUS ruling around. There are many cases that opinions are being released, and what I'm particularly interested in is allowing trans youth to participate in school activities, namely sports. And I've been in the fire waiting for that. I woke up hot. And I even considered, you know, um, not showing up today. and being in the rapid response and choosing the fire in a way that uh, is not the best choice for me. And so even in having a conversation with my supervisor of like, go do the things that you have planned. Everything's okay here. And I can still find myself like wanting to be in that unpredictability, the chaos, the anxiety, so much of the qualities that I can often experience with fire. And so my work for myself and my well-being is finding that balance, and sometimes it is choosing to be an observer. Sometimes there's not anything for me to do. I might not be able to put out the fire. What can I observe of the fire and its purification and its dance? And I don't have to be inside of the fire to experience that. Um, and I can see in some of my work where um, I don't need to listen to Chuck Schumer to know what the machine's doing. I don't need to listen to the news to know how the machine is operating. But when I get to come into this conversation, this is that nectar of those long days of summer that growing up on the West Coast, summer was a reprieve from the cold and the darkness. In the South, it is a time to slow down. Take it easy. Don't do too much. Come have an iced tea on the porch. I love that visualization that you shared, Michelle. Um, so this summer, I'm taking it easy. I'm going to allow the heat to exist. And when it's time to drink some cold ice water and sit in the AC, I'm going to do that and enjoy what's being birthed and what's being purified along the way. Mm, thank you.
Thank you, Ruby.
So good. So good. Um, I was I've been thinking about this summer and previous summers and things that I really enjoyed as a kid. Many of my childhood memories around summer have something to do with fire, which is fascinating. I hadn't really thought about it in that way. The first thing I thought of was fireworks. Growing up, we would chase fireworks. We would find fireworks. We would figure out which park has fireworks. We would go on holidays to see fireworks. And I can remember sitting there and like feeling so tiny, but also huge, like the fireworks reverberating like in my chest as I sat there. And that also was a communal space. It was a gathering of folks to marvel at this fire in the sky, the way that people manipulated and controlled and colored fire. Um, so fireworks. And I also, this randomly came to mind, I was in a commercial about fireworks also as a kid. I have to find that footage somewhere. So fireworks. I also love, love, love bonfires. Another communal gathering space where we tell stories and have food and um cozy up to ourselves and each other. And there's something also about the lingering smell of a bonfire. Like, and all these things, the fireworks, there's like a trail and the clouds, and there's a smell. Like all of my senses are ignited remembering these things. Same with the bonfire. There's a smell that lingers on your clothes. So you can remember that you were at this thing, that you did something last night with some people and shared space. And then just a good old barbecue. Barbecue, open fire. I mean, we didn't have the like, now there's the pitmaster grills and the fancy flat. We had the black with the grill, the coals, and I can just remember male family members usually manipulating that fire, trying to get it right. What temperature? We want to turn it up? We want to turn it down. We got vegetables, we got burgers, we got brats, and just yeah, and that had a communal aspect, a gathering aspect, as well as the lingering. You can smell the barbecue down the street. And if you've been to a barbecue, that smell lingers with you too. And so I'm also thinking about what fire leaves us with. What does fire leave us with? Um, there's a remembrance there of what happened, and that feels really important. Even now, I'm like, oh, my stomach is rumbling right now because I'm like, I need to get some good ass barbecue. I need to get around a bonfire. I need to see some fireworks. I'm also just reminded of people's fears around fire, and that came up too. We have a lot of idioms around fire. Trial by fire, hold your feet to the fire. Like all these like, don't get too close, it's hot. But I have always been fascinated by fire. Like Rebbe, you talked about its shape and its dance. And like when you look really closely, all the things that you see, I think I was young noticing like, oh, there's blue in fire. Like there's different colors in this thing, in the shape. Um, whether it was a little match I'm playing with or I'm at a bonfire. So the very many iterations, our feelings toward fire and what we're socialized into, how to feel about fire. Um, don't get too close. Don't get too close to the fire. And what it leaves us with are things that are all on my mind as we think about fire, as I think about fire.
Thank you, Stephanie. Now I'm hungry too for some barbecue.
Great to reflect on fire in this way and just to listen to how we relate to it and how memory is attached to that too, and sort of throughout time. And one thing I was present to is um, the way that I might think fire starts and then goes out and starts again may not actually be accurate. Like I'm thinking about the world and how we're always in the fire or always in the water or always working with air, right? Or always connected to earth. And it was partially what you said, Rebbe, made me think about the fluctuations of these elemental energies, or even my understanding of them within me and around me, and how I relate to them based on what's happening internally and externally. And I also say this as somebody who has an autoimmune situation in this body that is inflamed all of the time, really, and has been. And y'all have heard about that. It's happened to many of the women in my family, although it's not supposed to be genetic, but it definitely is genetic and ancestral and attached to memory as well. And the experience of that inflammation, which is heat, right, and fire fluctuates as well. And my relationship with that has shifted throughout time. It also feels connected to like how inflamed I think the world is or people are energetically. And then what that inflammation, when it's not in balance, to your point, Rebbe, like when fire is not in balance, or air or water or earth, and when we're not in balance, how that causes more inflammation and rupture and destruction, which we know is generative and also, human made destruction and disruption in this way feels misguided, um, and antithetical to what we're up to in our practice and our work and the different ways we're rooted in collective liberation. So thinking about that. And the other thing with this this inflammatory response in my body and my limbs, mainly my legs, is I've tried so many interventions. And I think about this with the like moments we're in and how many interventions we just in this Zoom room have implemented to respond to what's in the way of us being free. And how it's like not a one size fits all and how we have to keep doing it and how I have to be in my practices and like practice certain things to tend my system so that my lymphatic system works more effectively maybe and in a more balanced way, but also how I house this inflammation that I didn't create. Like I didn't create all of the mess of this moment within humanity and on the planet. We didn't. And yet we're like always in the fire. We're always in it. Um, so I'll bring it back to that. And I'm not asking us to figure out what we do with that in this moment. It's more of an awareness of what it means to acknowledge we're like always the fire and in the cauldron that the fire heats too, right? And around the cauldron and the fire. I'm thinking about you, Stephanie, and the bonfire. And always within that alchemical process with fire. So that's what I want to share.
Mm. Thank you, Michelle. I want to riff off that and also from you, Rebby, too, of that this notion of finding balance in a world of imbalance, in a world in imbalance. Because I'm thinking even around fire and heat, living currently at the moment in Europe, where right now we're under a heat dome and it's one of the hottest summers. It's that repeated pattern of places being hotter than they ever were before. I mean, 2 hours north of me, it was 95 degrees regularly. In parts of France, it's 104 right now. Like it's really, you know, unhealthy for humans and beings, animals and birds and all kinds of beings that can't stand those kinds of temperatures. And I think about that one of the many, what is it called, the polycrises that we're in right now. And, so many of us work, all of us work in social justice and work with activists and really incredible people. And I was coaching someone the other day who's a union leader who was expressing the tension she feels even as a change maker in a space where she said some of the newer people are coming in and they're like, burn it all down, right? Put fire to it, burn it down. None of this works, burn it down. And she's like, I get that. On one level, she's right. But she's also like, I've been here for 20 years and we planted these trees. You know what I mean? Like they're not all bad. Like we've tried, we've done some really good things. We planted these trees. And so there's something I'm really sitting with of the tension, even in change, of both the need and the beauty, if in a forest fire, which is a really terrifying thing, but there is a part of it that is as I understand it, a management. Like there's a place where the forest renews and other, you get rid of things that the dead wood that can then compost and become other things, or the sprouts that come up. Like there's a way that fire can be healthy and a cleaning and a cleansing fire, and a burn it all down can even be a part of that. And then there's a place where I also understand the tension of like, but we planted those trees, but I love this forest, or but we've put so much energy into tending. So just other thoughts. And the last thing I'll say, Stephanie, I loved your memories of fireworks because at this festival I was at the other day, the night ended, and I love the play of fire and water because my biggest memories as a child were swimming, always going swimming in the summer, swimming in the pool, swimming in the pool. And but at this festival the other day, they did fireworks over the river. So the whole river was filled with the fireworks over it and then the reflection of the fireworks in the water, which was really powerful and beautiful. And then at the end of the night, many people, a lot of hundreds, thousands of people walk down the river to the ocean. So they walk to the water until dawn as sort of the ending of this ritual. So that sort of interplay too of cooling after the heat.
I have a lot of thoughts. Y'all, there's so much. There's so much. I'm really glad we're recording. Um, a couple of things that came to mind as y'all were talking. Coming back to what I was saying about fear, I think there's like an irony in this like big ass ball of sun in the sky that is lighting the way, and people talk about light versus dark. That sun makes all of us darker. Like the light creates darkness, and people are, I was at yesterday there was like a I'm in Dallas. There's the FIFA World Cup stuff is happening. Not going to Arlington and paying $1,000, but there's like fan festivals and pop-ups and all the things. And they had one yesterday, and I was looking at the crowd, and so many people had umbrellas, and I was like, "Oh, yeah." It just, there's something like a different orientation. And again, this is part of my memories as a kid of like going outside and being really excited to be in the sun and experiencing people who are actively trying not to get sun. Like, because getting darker is bad. Like, dark is bad. I want to stay away from the sun. And I was like, when I first encountered that, it was so hard for me to like wrap my head around that. Like, why would you hide from the sun? That is so wonderful. But yeah, we could colorism, we could talk about, we can go there. So that came to mind, just the irony that this fire creates darkness. I also was thinking about what else is left behind after a fire, ashes, and how people, what the use of ashes, human ashes, fire ashes, like the ashes of what we burn and what we do with those ashes. And my brain was doing a spiral there. Oh, there's something that you all have mentioned about sustainability, and I feel like we've talked about it in the context of this gathering, talking about these elements and others. The notion that we are fire keepers, we are fire tenders. What does it mean to be the one to tend to a slow burn, to sustain a fire over time, to even when folks want to burn it all down, like burn it all down to me feels very fixed and like we burn it all down, then it's done. But to hold a fire over time is tough. It's actually it's harder to do than to just throw some fire on it and be done. And so, what does it take to be a fire tender, a fire keeper? How and how do we get folks into those roles? Because we do, yes, we do need to burn some things down, and some of the fires need to smolder for a long ass time. There are things that we need to slowly burn over time. And that related to me to this, I think Rebbe, you first mentioned it about burnout. That's what's happening individually, us as these fires who are jumping in, jumping out, jumping in, jumping out. We are burning out. Our fire is being put out because we are not sustaining our or being resourced enough over time. So I have so many. I'm like, this is a applies to everything. Everything is everything. Um, and yeah, sustainability is on my mind. How do we stay in it for a long time with ourselves and other people when we are the fire, when the fire is outside of us, when the fire, like when we are a part of all these pieces? So much. I'm going to pause for now.
There is so much there. And in uh, mhm. As a fire tender, as a fire keeper, what is the resource of keeping the fire going? And I can see fire as the energy. Particularly folks that are doing work to support laborers tend to be the core central, a core unification of many fire tenders. And they build fire together by creating energy and demands and using their time and their voices and their talents and their resources to um, inspire change, to demand change. Like there's like fire creation in that. And I've seen leaders throughout the world in community, in readings, in history, who are fire tenders. And I wonder where I have taken the perspective that they are the fire. And so in this conversation, it's, you know, we can light up the world. There's so many idioms around this, around fire and light. And maybe there is something to this that you have mentioned, Stephanie, of how do we resource ourselves to smolder over time without being what is burning up, to be what is fueling the fire. When I think about it in that way, I think I'll reflect on this for a long time, both in my work and even how I, exist in community, and um, how I am with conflict, another type of fire in other ways. Um, Again, which can often, in some ways, be generative. Um, mm, mm, I'm gonna let that one marinate. Getting back to the barbecue.
Remy, I just wanted to add to what you were saying, thinking about, Stephanie, you brought this up, burnout, right? Like, I think I just want to mirror back that I've heard three things come up in this conversation that if anybody's listening besides us, want them to remember three healing practices or antidotes to burnout that I've heard us say are, tea on the porch, right? Like, slow down, take moments, right? Take those moments of cooling, of connection, of slowness, of rest. And also, Michelle, when you said celebrate your harvest, you know what I mean? I think so often we're looking for the giant win and we don't then celebrate the small or the big or the small harvest. I for the first time this year planted a tiny porch garden. It's so much smaller than the gardens I've had in the past. But I just harvested, I sent Michelle a picture, like a little bowl full, a handful of okra and about five little tomatoes and two peppers. And it's not a giant harvest, but I'm so grateful for this little baby harvest that came through on the porch. So I think that's just another antidote that I think about. How do we remember to celebrate and celebrate together the harvest that what we have created together?
Yeah, and I wanted to add to, if we're gathering practices, Rebbe, you brought up one, which is to separate ourselves from the thing that's being burned. Like that, when you said that, I got goosebumps and I was just like, oh, we don't have to burn ourselves in the process, which is what a lot of us, for whatever reason, self-sacrifice or martyrdom or like self-righteousness, we don't actually have to burn in the fire with the thing that we are burning. So that separation, that distinction feels important, especially as we let go of and grieve what we are losing, leaving, burning. That stood out to me. I was like, the separation feels mind-blowing.
Um, I was at a ceremony in 2017, and it was a 3-day ceremony, and we were camping out. Um, and somebody had to tend the fire the entire time, so they had to take shifts because no one person was going to be able to sit there for 3 days and nights, right? Tending this fire. And I remember I had a relationship with fire, of course, at that time, but my relationship with fire definitely deepened in 2017 when I had moved across the country and had a really amazing fireplace and firewood waiting for me. during one of the most like pivotal and difficult years of my life. Um, and so I observed the fire keepers at this ceremony and really, I think, like served as a witness to their process of um, in fully embodying the role of firekeeper. Like it was hot, it was hot actually that summer in Oregon, and they didn't complain about it. Um, People would bring more wood when they needed wood. So there are people who carried the wood, which is also connected to being able to maintain the fire, which feels like an important role given the opportunity for ceremony collectively at this time to respond to the inflammation and imbalance in the way we've talked about. And I just sort of, I remember sitting in reverence. I think there was those being a witness and also um, revering these fire keepers um, who, one by one, they'd add a log to the fire to keep it going until it was time for it to go out. Although the energy of um, that fire didn't ever go out, right? I'm talking about it years later, 9 years later in this space. And so I'm just like, I'm really gathering what has been shared about alt fire, but also being a fire keeper and what it means to pick up that mantle or um, embody that archetypal energy of fire keeper and fire tender. And like the utility of fire that's lost when there's mindlessness, right? We know wildfires have started because people are careless. So it wasn't a managed burn. It was there was a fire ban and somebody lit, right, a fire because they thought it would be okay. And then it wasn't, right? And so just thinking about the contrast in that experience and then how long wildfires last and how difficult they are to put out and how many resources have to go into that. So I just like I want us and myself included. I'm really just talking to like well us, but the larger us to be really mindful fire keepers. Um, to know when the fire actually needs more fuel or when it needs more air, right? Or you have the bucket of water close by in case something, gets out of control. And in a like time when there's so much reactivity, part of what I witness is like it's like fire and burning up in the way y'all have talked about. Like we don't have to burn up in the fire, even if we're like the first responders to the fire, right? It's just I want people to be more like mindful, steady, clear. Fire's clarifying instead of careless. And also, I want people to remember lineage in the way often you talk about it, Stephanie. Like, we're not the first fire keepers. We're just part of a lineage of fire keepers. So, how do we want to honor that? And if we burn it all down, that does not, for me, feel like um, it doesn't feel like it feels like I'm dishonoring the lineage of fire keepers who have very carefully tended a fire so that I and we could be here right now. Like, so I want to be that kind of fire keeper who's like, yeah, I'm in this body now, but there's something else. So someone else will maybe have this conversation in the future, or be in ceremony watching fire keepers and wondering, oh, how can that be me too, or how is that me too, right? And so I'm I'm not sort of, I'm actually very clearly invoking that kind of um, fire keeper and inviting folks to consider that we are all fire keepers. So how do we want to inhabit that role? Yeah.
I think that's a great place to end.
Ashe, let it be so.
See to it.
Mhm.
Yeah.